Adyapurusa Kalpe Kulpe Sijatyajaha Atma Mani Admamananam Sasamya Chatipaticha. Please repeat. Saesa Adyapurusa Kalpe Kalpe Srijatyajaha Admamani Admamananam Sasamya Chatipaticha. Saha He Isaha the very Adyaha the original personality of Godhead. Purusaha the Mahavishnu incarnation, a plenary portion of Govinda, Lord Krishna. Kalpe Kalpe, in each and every millennium. Srijati, creates. Ajaha, the unborn. Atma, self. Atmani, upon the self. Atmana, by his own self. Atmanam, own self. Saha, he. Samyachati, absorbs. Pati, maintains. Cha, also. That supreme original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, expanding his plenary portion as Mahavishnu, the first incarnation, creates this manifested cosmos, but he is unborn. The creation, however, takes place in him, and the material substance and manifestations are all himself. He maintains them for some time and absorbs them into himself again. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The creation is not different from the Lord, and still he is not in the creation. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 9.4 as follows. Maya tatam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani nachaham tes vatistita. The impersonal conception of the Absolute Truth is also a form of the Lord called avyakta murti. Murti means form, but because his impersonal feature is inexplicable to our limited senses, he is the avyakta murti form. And in that inexplicable form of the Lord, the whole creation is resting. Or in other words, the whole creation is the Lord himself. And the creation is also not different from him. But at the same time, I cannot say simultaneously. At the same time means, right? He as the manifestation, he as the original personality of God, Sri Krishna, is aloof from the created manifestation. The impersonalist gives stress to the impersonal form of feature of the Lord and does not believe in the original personality of the Lord. But the Vaishnavas accept the original form of the Lord, of whom the impersonal form is merely one of the features. The impersonal and personal conceptions of the Lord are existing simultaneously. And this fact is clearly described both in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and also in other Vedic scriptures. Unconceivable to human intelligence, the idea must simply be accepted on the authority of the scriptures, and it can only be practically realized by the progress of devotional service unto the Lord, and never by mental speculation or inductive logic. The impersonalists depend more or less on inductive logic, and therefore they always remain in darkness about the original personality of God, Sri Krishna. Their conception of Krishna is not clear. Although everything is clearly mentioned in all Vedic scriptures, a poor fund of knowledge cannot comprehend the existence of an original person form of the Lord when he is expanded in everything. This imperfectness is due more or less to the material conception that a substance distributed widely in parts can no longer exist in the original form. The original personality of Godhead Adyaha, Govinda, expands himself as the Mahavishnu incarnation and rests in the causal ocean, which he himself creates. The Brahma Samhita confirms this as follows. Can I skip the reading the verse? Is that okay? Yeah. Lord Brahmaji says in his Brahma Samhita, I worship the primeval Lord Govinda who lies down in the causal ocean in his plenary portion as Mahavishnu, with all the universes generating from the pores of hair of his transcendental body, and who accepts the mystic slumber of eternity. So this Mahavishnu is the first incarnation in the creation, and from him all the universes are generated and all material manifestations are produced one after another. The causal ocean is created by the Lord as the Mahatattva, as a cloud in the spiritual sky, and is only a part of his different manifestations. The spiritual sky is an expansion of his personal rays. He is a Mahatattva cloud also. He lies down and generates the universes by his breathing, and again by entering into each universe as Garbhodakasai Vishnu. He creates Brahma, Shiva, and each universe, and many other demigods for maintenance of the universe, and again absorbs the whole thing into his person, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.7. Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya Prakritim Yanti Mamikam Kalpakshaye Punastani Kalpado Visrijamyaham. O son of Kunti, when the Kalpa, or the duration of the life of Brahma, is ended, then all the created manifestations enter into my Prakriti, or energy. And again, when I desire the same creation takes place by my personal energy. The conclusion is that these are all but displays of the Lord's inconceivable personal energies, of which no one can have any full information. This point we have already discussed. So to start with, I'm not really seriously qualified to give this class because I have more questions than answers. I hardly have any answers, and every time I read, I have so many questions. So, and also I didn't really prepare, so I'm just gonna try to give, and also there is not much time, so it's okay. Okay, so the main points that I see in the purport is that everything is within God, but God is not everything. And that is sometimes we cannot understand that by material logic, but Lord Chaitanya, he put that thing in a very simple and understandable way, like Achintya Veda Aveda Tattva. So God can be in everything, but at the same time outside everything. Without that concept, it's very difficult to understand what is going on, because the problem is that we try to understand everything with our material intelligence in relation to the things that we have experience with. So that's why many times for us, like for example when we're reading the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, at least for myself, I find contradictions, or I find things that is so difficult to understand. But in reality, just because we are trying to understand this philosophy sometimes with our limited material knowledge and experience. Like for example, if we take as an example virtual reality and books. For example, in the 15th century, if you tell a person, like in the 15th century, books were really big and the pages were big. So you tell a person there, actually you can fit 1,000 books within this spot, which is, it will be like USB or microchip or something like that. They could never conceive, they will think that is something that makes no sense. Or for example, if you tell someone when they used to give messages, like for example to get a message across someone, they will have to go by horse or walking with a letter and give it, and will take days and days. So you take a person from those times and you tell them, no, actually you can write a message, and even before you finish, or after you finish writing the text, it will be already on the other side of the planet. So they cannot accept or conceive because their experience is limited to that time and circumstances. So another point that is spoken about here is about the personal aspect of God and the impersonal aspect of God. So from my point of view, every time I read something, I find the personal concept of God being much more rational than the impersonal concept of God. Like Ramai Swami said one day in the class, he said that if you say that God cannot have a form, you're limiting God. And that goes against the very principle of God, which He is unlimited. So God can have a form and God cannot have a form at the same time. But if you start putting limitation in God, then you're not talking about God, you're talking about something else. So I found that very, logical and rational, because it's true. So if we start defining God, one of the things is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, He's limitless, so many qualities that God has. So if you start limiting Him, then we're not talking about God. Another point that Prabhupada made here, like indirectly, is that actually Bhakti is a science. So sometimes some scientists, because some others, like for example Carl Sagan, he believed in the existence of a superior intelligence behind the creation. But some scientists, they say their main, slogan is, we do not believe in anything that cannot be proven. But yet, most of the theories of scientists, like mainstream scientists, are not proven. Like for example, when I think about the Big Bang Theory and I think about the concept of God being a superior intelligence behind everything that exists, it's much more rational to think that there is an intelligence. It's more rational to think that than think, oh no, actually everything is accidental, it's just an accidental clash of elements. Because in science they say, well, you have a theory and then you have the experimentation. So that's what we have in Krishna consciousness or in Vaishnava philosophy. We have the theory, which is the Vedic text, which Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and then we have the experimentation, which is sadhana bhakti. So it's not that no one is asking bhakti practitioners to just blindly follow anything. They say this is the text and this is what you can experience to see if the text makes sense. So that's exactly the same thing the scientists have. They have a text and then they have the experimentation. And in so many scientific theories, they're just theories. So that goes against the main concept of science. I want to also talk about the fact that in general people don't believe in God at the moment, mainly because of the concept. So everything that we believe or don't believe in is related to the concept and the experimentation that we have around. So people don't believe in God at the moment because the concept of God that they're given is a very, it's not a rational God. Like for example in Christianity, they accept that God is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, everything. But then when He comes and He's really good, He's kind, He's generous, everything. But then when you ask them, so why do we suffer? Or why some people take birth with a lot of facilities and happiness and other people just take birth in a miserable condition, poverty, no beauty, no intelligence, diseases and things like that. So because the concept of karma is not there, then they cannot explain it. So when you when someone who is a little bit inquisitive goes through that path of religion, you think, well, it doesn't make sense. If that's saying that God is generous, God is good, God can do everything, and nothing moves without the will of God, then why is all these things happening in the world? Only when you introduce karma into this, into the concept of God, everything makes sense. And I would like to talk also about the fact that sometimes we often use the fact that, oh, whatever Krishna wants, whatever God wants. But actually, there is a verse in the Bhagavatam, there's many verses, but one of them is that says that actually, like for example here, Prabhupada was explaining how after the Kalpa, everything gets absorbed into Mahavishnu. We, if we're not liberated or we didn't go back to the spiritual world, we also get absorbed into Mahavishnu. But what happened there after? It's not that because we go into the body of Mahavishnu that we're just going back together. No. There are latent desires, it says here. And those latent desires, I don't know where I put my phone, but I had the verse in there. Can you have a look in there? I think it's there. So he says, when material nature was agitated by my glance, Krishna is talking, the three material modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, became manifested to fulfill the pending desires of the conditioned souls. So it's not like God feels like, okay, yeah. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that when he mentions in the verse of the Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna says, when I desire. But he doesn't desire out of, how do you say, oh, I feel like it, so now it's going to happen. All through the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, the point that I see all along is that the whole manifestation is created to fulfill the desire of the living entities. So when we suffer, we can say, at least from my understanding, and from the philosophy, the way I understand the philosophy, we can't say, oh, that's God that's doing that to me. No, we are part of a global karma because we're here in the creation, and we are obviously Nityasiddhas, Nityavadas, eternally conditioned. So we are part of our action and reaction law, which is the law of karma. Another point that I didn't know, and I don't know if anyone here learned it, Pandits, I didn't know that the coastal ocean was the Mahatattva, was the same thing. Could you please explain that, Maharaj? The coastal ocean and Mahatattva is the same thing. So that's it says here that is the coastal, where is it? Yeah. The coastal ocean is created by the Lord as the Mahatattva. So it's the same thing? Could we say that? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have two questions. One question is, what are the main points? I'm just going to ask this to the Vaishnavis. what are the main points that we touch in this, that Prabhupada spoke about in this verse and purport? Yes, thank you. And is there a verse that anyone knows, just one verse, in the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, in which is the impersonal concept of the absolute truth? Not the impersonal concept, but the fact that impersonalists believe that God becomes conditioned by material nature. So is there a verse in which that is defeated, or that subject is touched? Anyone knows a verse that talks about that? Sorry? The Brahma Samhita or the other one? But that's more like the creation is not different from God and He's not in the creation. But I'm talking about something directly talking about personalism and impersonalism. Okay, so we read many times about impersonal philosophy and personal philosophy. So I was asking if there is a verse within Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, in which that issue is addressed directly, if anyone knows of anyone. Okay, anything else?
By me, my manifested form is entire universe pervaded. All beings are in me, but I'm not in them. So he's talking about impersonal and personal, correct?
Yeah, you're right. But not exactly like, for example, there is a verse, I'm just going to read it because so in Canto 3, Chapter 7, Text 9, Maitreya talks about the illogicality of impersonalism by saying that if God is unconditioned, it's against all logic to say that at a certain point God becomes conditioned. So I found that very appropriate, because sometimes when you talk about God and the personal form, and people who are into the yoga path or people who are into the impersonal philosophy, sometimes they ask, so where is it written? And we hear so many things, but sometimes we don't have like a concrete verse to talk about that. And also in another place that I saw it, it was in the 11th canto, when Lord Brahma is asked some questions about why the soul becomes conditions, why the soul, how can the soul get rid of the tendency to be materially conditioned. And so Lord Brahma does know how to answer that, and Hamsa, the swan incarnation, appears, and he talks about that as well. So Hamsa defeats the impersonal philosophy, talking to the four Kumaras. I don't know if Maharaj knows more about that verse, or Nishingakavacha Prabhu. No? You know, the verse in, you know, the verse in which the Kumaras asked Lord Brahma a question about how to get rid of that tendency to become conditioned, and then Hamsa avatar appears. Thank you. Okay, so it's 8:16. If anyone has any questions, sorry, my class was not properly prepared. I faced my fears. I came here. I was really afraid because I'm impressed by the audience, but I tried a little bit. If you have any questions, suggestions, criticism, anything, please speak up. Please say something.
Well, I really like the class, but my hearing's not so good, so I missed some of it. I was just, it's just a reflection, is it okay? It's not a question.
Please.
Can you get the microphone? It's all right, I'll talk loud.
Microphone?
I can talk loud.
Okay.
I was just thinking on the way in how we're so fortunate that we've already had an experience of Krishna being very personal. You know, because we still have so much dross and so much, you know, we have a long way to go to become pure devotees maybe, but at the same time, even though we're nearby, we know we're sitting here in front of Krishna, we can see Krishna, and we've had so many experiences of Krishna personally protecting us or guiding us, and Prabhupada's books, and listening to the nice class. So, you know, Krishna is always appearing in a personal way. Hope you don't mind me just rambling on.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very interesting. Anybody else? Maharaj, the microphone is coming.
Question or comments?
Sadhana, you have something to add? Sati? Prem? Please, Prem always has insights. Come on, say something. Say something.
Yeah, thank you for the class. It was nice. You know, you kind of challenged us all to remember and think of things more, and hopefully that helps to kind of consolidate in our head more. You know, it's really nice being able to be in a community like this where we can discuss and, you know, very openly feel confident to just talk about Krishna Katha. So, thank you.
Thank you.
One thing is come to mind, how the impersonal view, the impersonal understanding is a valid one. Krishna has his impersonal feature, and as we know, the three features of the absolute truth, Brahman being one of them. There's no sort of aberration there, there's nothing wrong. There's a less complete understanding, you can say. Perfect, more perfect, and less perfect. So, but we hear that the Mayavadis are those who take that a bit too extreme, or in the sense that they emphasize Brahman over the Bhagavan, or actually even more than that, say that Bhagavan is Maya, that the differentiation, the variety, pastime's name ultimately is Maya, and there is only Brahman, and that Brahman incarnates as, you know, they had the misunderstanding in their impersonalistic attachments. So I was wondering if maybe can we make the same mistake perhaps in our own personal approach, and perhaps discount the impersonal, having an attachment to the personal which is wonderful and will only be beneficial, but perhaps it's not as offensive obviously as making out that Bhagavan and his pastime is such a Maya, but to throw out completely or too much the impersonal understanding and misunderstand the oneness, miss the importance of the oneness. We hear Achintya Bheda, the Bheda and the Abheda are simultaneous, and one is not actually any less important than the other in the whole scheme of things. In the spiritual world, there's all the variety that we find in the material world and so much more. But what also makes it so much different is that underlying oneness, that inseparable connection that all beings have with Krishna. And so it seems it's as fundamental with the oneness as it's the difference. So, I was just considering that, and like for there to be love, true love to be exchanged, there must be difference, there must be an exchange between two beings, but it must be also on the platform of oneness, that connection on that same reality, that not two separate. Like Radha and Krishna are not two separate beings, they are one, ekatmana, they are one soul, but at the same time they are separate, they are different. Anyways, just a thought that came to me about kind of the importance of the impersonal aspect as well.
Yeah, and in fact, when we carefully read the Bhagavatam, and that's like a compliment for the best class in the world. When we read carefully the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, even there are verses in which it says there's two types of Mahatmas, impersonalist and personalist. So impersonalist is always, a path which is higher, obviously, than material conditioning. And is contemplated I didn't study the Vedas, but every time we read something about the Vedas, impersonal feature of God is there. And in the Bhagavatam as well, and in the Bhagavad Gita as well. The only problem, my way of understanding this is, when Prabhupada came to the West, he was dealing with a lot of confusion. That's why many times he said also forget about yoga, bhakti yoga, devotional service. Because he was dealing with people who had a lot of confusion, they were impersonalists preaching, but at the same time the aim of those preachers, or like some that they were in America already when he came, their aim was not pure, their aim was a little bit, not to lead people towards really God, but to lead people towards them. So in the same way that Buddha came and he said, don't listen to the Vedas, God does not exist, although he was himself the incarnation of God. In the same way, Prabhupada, in the time he came with all the hippies, all the, what was going on, he just said, okay, just concentrate on Bhakti Yoga. In fact, when we read the Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, we see the word yoga and Ashtanga yoga mentioned all the time as a genuine, authentic path. And in fact, when we see all the stories, we see that only in Kali Yuga, Bhakti has become like just a unique path. But before Kali Yuga, all the stories that we read, Bhakti is a part of the path that sages practice. Like, for example, even when Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest, he's considered a devotee, but he was doing Ashtanga yoga as well. He was controlling the breath, he was meditating on the super soul. When Narada Muni, when he was little, and the sages gave him the knowledge, and his mother died, and he went to the forest as well, Narada Muni told him, the process. It was not only chant Hare Krishna and be happy, it was also, pranayama and different processes, meditation on Vishnu. So this is the way I see it. In the same way that Buddha came in a certain period in which people were totally confusing the directions of the Vedas for their own sense gratification. There were massive killing of animals, and the Brahmanas were corrupted. So he appeared and he said, forget about that. So the way I see it is a little bit like when a business presents a product and it targets to the audience, So is it the same way? God keeps appearing, or his messengers, or his different gurus appeared, and they say apparently contradictory things, but it's just according to the type of people that they're there at that time. For example, Jesus spoke about, in an indirect way. He said, don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. And that is not, Christ was not trying to make saints of people. He was just advising people that if you want to be happy, this is what you have to do. And that's what Buddha does as well. That's what impersonalists do as well. So if we read different philosophies, we see that the essence is the same, but the way it's presented is different. So I totally agree with you in that sense that personalism is a very respected path, and it's all through the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. But Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is ultimately impersonalists come to me, but it's a very difficult path, mainly in Kali Yuga. So it's all about the time cycles, you know. So, for example, in Satya Yuga, people can sit and meditate in the forest for I don't know how long. But now in Kali Yuga, for how long can we sit there, you know? I went once to Buddhist meditation, and there I understood, because at a certain period I left ISKCON, so I did yoga, I did different things, and I understood why this type of meditation is not appropriate for Kali Yuga. How many hours can you sit there, you know? But how many hours can we do kirtan, dancing, and, you know, even talking like that, or even service, you know? Like the whole bhakti process is all about this branch of Astanga Yoga, that is Ishvara Pranidhana, or absorption or devotion to God. All we do here is try to naturally think of God, and it's much more easy than sitting there without doing anything and focusing on Paramatma, at least in Kali Yuga. Because here we're cooking for Krishna, we're cleaning for Krishna, everything is connected. So in reality, the way I see it is that Bhakti is a very easy process, and it's very, compatible with Kali Yuga. That's the way I see it. But yes, impersonal philosophy is totally considered in the Vedas, although I didn't read the Vedas, but sometimes Prabhupada mentions the Vedas, in which, you know, impersonal philosophy is mentioned. The four Kumaras were impersonalists. Sukadeva Goswami was an impersonalist as well. But the only problem I see with impersonal philosophy is when they limit God. When they say, oh yeah, actually, like you said, when they come to the fact they're saying that actually when God appears, he's material. He's conditioned by material nature. So how can someone who is like saying that the computer will take over the brain who has created the computer? That's impossible. So it's the same thing that's saying, oh, God, you know, this material nature could overcome God. So what is the definition of God then? So I don't know if that is in relation to thank you. Anything else?
Yes. There's a mantra in the Upanishad, I can't remember, Sri Upanishad, where the prayer is, please remove your dasi and your garments so I can see your effects, so I can see the effects.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are so many things that are, everything rests on Krishna and fills the strand on the thread, we're reading Bhagavad Gita. So, Krishna's attractive, and the rays emanating from Krishna's body are also attractive, and we can get very waylaid by that because we want to enjoy that. But when we see Krishna's beautiful face, then we just want to serve Krishna. It's the ultimate kind of unity and diversity, isn't it? That we're, the oneness is that we're Krishna, we're all expansions of Krishna. But Krishna is the supreme whole, and we're the little parts and parcels. And our constitutions to serve him. So it's the unity's there, that's the oneness. We're all, you know, we're all Krishna's parts and parcels. There's one. And he's the one from whom all the other little parts and parcels are emanating. So, well, that's all I have to say, really.
Thank you.
But that's such a beautiful mantra.
Yeah, it is actually. Thank you for reminding. Sri Upanishad. Yeah.
So it's dazzling. It's coming from Krishna, so of course it's dazzling. And it's Krishna's energy.
Oh, be
It's not
interested.
different
Yeah.
from Krishna. But Krishna, the source of that, like Prabhupada always saying, the sun and the sunshine.
Yeah.
And he says, because the sun's shining in my room, but the sun isn't in my room. There's a difference between the shine and the person.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And also thank you to Ajita for allowing this, like Prem said, that, in other places you have to be, so everything, you cannot give class unless this, unless that, and he's so tolerant and he's so understanding that he gives us the opportunity, and this community is really good for that, because it's very like, familiar, and everyone has an opportunity to talk, or it's not just only very advanced people, but also very fallen like me can talk here. So thank you very much. Hari Bol.